Often people come to us asking about the Dhamma, about the teachings of the Buddha. And often, digitally, they can come to us as well. There's different forums, etc. Or even on the street, people you speak or they've seen you somewhere, they ask you about the Dhamma, and often their understanding or opinion on the Dhamma is about it being some type of a philosophy. Now, whenever I hear that, I kind of cringe a little. From the start, the Buddha always separated himself from all those famous philosophers and philosophies of his time. Okay, separated himself for what? He cared about people and the reduction of people's suffering, the suffering that all beings go through. Therefore, it had to do with practice. It's all about practice, this path. Yes, it has a huge reservoir, an inventory of knowledge, principles that are still being discovered every year. And in the case of psychotherapy or psychology or endeavors like that, researchers are constantly discovering things that I just go, that's been said and done before, thank you, 2,600 years ago. It's interesting because in science and anything, any journals scientifically related, hard sciences, or even medicine, if, let's say, you and I are doing a research and we make a huge discovery, one of the first things, or before we publish, one of the first things we must do is go and research other libraries to see if anybody else has done anything remotely similar. And if we find one, we need to probe it and try to look to see if it's matching up with our own research and the exact things that they found. So many times scientists actually give up. Even though they've done the research for over a decade, they have to give it up because, hey, 150 years ago, somewhere in Austria, some guy had to come up with this thing, which now, 150 years later, I'm thinking, oh yes, I got it. Unfortunately, we are not seeing that in the field of, for example, psychology or psychotherapy. Many of the things that everybody from Freud and on has been spoken about, explained in detail by the Buddha. Perhaps not using German words or Western contextual ways of explaining something, however they're there, clearly indicated. But this talk is not about that. This talk is about the thing that any therapeutic method and all of the teachings of the Buddha are trying to address. It is, well, let me just give you a context. A couple of years ago, I was in India, and I had the great honor and privilege to be guided to a place which I did not know about, that it was going to be part of my itinerary. It's a place called Garbis in India, close to Rajgir. And it is a sublime place. You go up these steep stairs. There's monkeys on the way, people. And then you finally get to this opening. The side of the mountain opens up, and there you have all of Rajgir and all those provinces in front of your eyes. And then there's this huge boulder that's jutted out of from the side of the mountain, and you can sit there comfortably in meditation. That was the place where the Buddha gave the talk called, that we know today as the fire sermon. He gave this discourse to 1,000 bhikkhus that had just taken on the robes. These 1,000 bhikkhus were yogis once, only a few weeks earlier. For most of their adult lives, they were bhikkhus. They were called the matted-haired yogis. One teacher had 500 yogis under his tutelage. The other teacher had 300 yogis under his tutelage, and the last one had 200. So in total, they were 1,000. So they had seen the Buddha not teaching them the Dhamma at the time before becoming bhikkhus. But they had seen enough to finally come to the Buddha, the teachers, and they said, we want to take on the robes. Would you give us the refuge? Would you give us the robes? Take us on, give us the going forth. The Buddha, for each of those 3 teachers, said, but you have a great following. You must first go and address this request that you made to me, mention it to them and see what they say. So each of these 3, one after another, did this. And they were closer to the Himalayas, so there was the river flowing. And each of these teachers, along with their yogis, ended up cutting their hair, and they were actually fire-worshipping kind of yogis, by the way. All 1,000 of them. And they had to throw all those furnitures that they had to use, the utensils they had to use for their own rituals. And the river, as it was flowing downstream, saw all the matted hair cut off. And they were floating down. And the other yogis were afraid something must have happened to their friends. So they rushed up. And they saw they had all become bhikkhus. That group also did the same thing. Now the last 200 also saw the same thing. And they rushed up and they became part of the 1,000. So now you have a historical context somewhat. So a few weeks later, the Buddha and his bhikkhus now, this is happening in the earliest days of the Buddha's dispensation, when he had just become a Buddha. So he didn't have that many, he had the 5 original students, of course, but he now had his huge following wherever he was going. So he ends up in Gayasisa, in this mountain. And then everybody sits in their comfortable seats around this area. And then the Buddha said, everything is burning. The eye is burning. The eye is burning, and what does the eye catch? It catches forms, objects, sees things. Forms are burning. And when you put these 2 together, you have eye consciousness. Eye consciousness is burning. And when you have these 3, you have eye contact. Eye contact is burning. And when you have these 4, you have eye. Because of contact, we have the feeling that comes in. Because of phassa, or contact. Eye feeling is burning. What kind of feeling? Either painful, pleasant, or neither painful nor pleasant. All these 3 are burning. And when you have these 3, you bring in birth. Because of birth, there's aging and death. Because of aging and death, there's sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. So we're constantly worried about these things coming in. Every single one of us. When we're all alone at night, putting our head to the pillow. Aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. It is happening to us. It is happening to every single idea we have about ourselves as being this person. And especially those people that we love and we care about. The world we know. Burning with what? Everything is burning. Well, burning with what? Burning with craving. I don't like this. I like that. And you have craving, you have clinging. Because of clinging, that's where we attach ourselves to. We like to latch on and not let go, including the nasty, negative feelings. We want to push it away. I always resemble it to that chewing gum that you step on, or it's stuck on your feet. You want to throw it away. It doesn't go away. You try to take it with the other hand. It's the same thing. Craving is not necessarily just about things that we love. Craving is also about the thing we want to get rid of by bringing in a state where it's not there anymore. Having a person in your life that you don't want them there. Having a sickness that you don't want it there. Or something about you that has presented itself out of the blue, such as becoming forgetful. Or you reach over your leg and you're trying to come up the stairs and your leg is not as responsive as it used to be. Or you want to sleep at night, you can't. And you have an important meeting the following day. You want to get rid of this insomnia. So you see, the Buddha did not care about philosophy. He cared about practice, and most of the people that came to him to listen for over 45 years were not scholars. Many of them did not even know how to read and write. And India had one of the most sublime cultures in literature, in philosophy, in poetry, in arts at the time, and for many centuries. But you had a huge part of the population that didn't. They were just, we're talking about a time period in Indian history where farming became huge, and that's how you had a class of the society, the business people, the merchants who showed up all of a sudden, and that was, historically speaking, one of the reasons why really Buddhism flourished, was because you had a huge part of these merchants becoming supporters. And they didn't just become supporters of the Dhamma and the Buddha and the bhikkhus out of the blue. They became supporters because they themselves experienced the fruits that the Buddha was talking about. The fruits of the practice. They became Sotapannas, Sakadagamis, Anagamis at least. So, when I was looking at this, and remember, I've been studying, along with many people during the past 30 some years, and you kind of get, when you're studying and you're involved in scholarly work, research, this and that, you kind of get full of yourself, with yourself. Yeah, I know. So it's very easy to be caught up in this idea of a self-individuality and what I know. So it takes a while, and it takes a lot of humility and courage to kind of cut yourself from that and come back to the actual words of the Buddha. That's why I always encourage people to read the suttas. They're not that complex. So if the Buddha was able to reach a farmer, and all of a sudden that farmer was becoming enlightened, something that many teachers with many PhDs tell us, no, you can't become enlightened in this very life. There's a problem. So the Buddha's path is very simple. But because our minds today have become so adept at expecting things to be complex and complicated, we kind of shun it. If something comes to us and it's so simple, simplicity has beauty in it. It has a certain elegance to it. Perhaps that's one of the reasons when we are looking outside and we see a flower, or we get a whiff of, in the breeze, a whiff of freshly cut grass, we kind of go, oh, that's lovely. Where's all our philosophies, our complex thinking at that time? Or when we see a child smiling at us? So when we bring all this noise with us, it's because of craving as well. Remember the thing I mentioned about everything is burning? Well, the eye is not the only one. The ear is burning. Sounds are burning. Ear consciousness is burning. Ear contact is burning. Ear feeling is burning. Burning with what? Burning with craving to have things be a certain way, or not be in a certain way, or completely being in a delusional, illusional, completely based in ignorance and say, I really don't care. Where we have a huge mass of our population doing that more and more as we become inundated with unnecessary information, removing us from the immediacy of life, the simplicity of life. Today parents cannot even sit with their children and just be. Researchers, sociologists, psychologists, child therapists, everybody can sit there and tell you clearly that the first 3 years of a child's life are extremely necessary for you to be there, for them to feel the safety. Today our fires, our craving-driven fires of wanting this, not wanting that, and only if I get that, that's when I'm going to be happy, that's when I'm going to be safe, is now completely saturated the lives of future human beings. What I mean by that is a mother or a father sitting there with their child, if they find those 5 minutes, to sit with them, are simply unable to just sit there. Because they themselves are full of anxiety, they themselves are full of worries, craving. Remember? Craving is not, let's not just take that as a word in English, C-R-A-V-I-N-G. No, it's not that. Craving comes from, the Pali word is tanha, which is a thirst. This unquenching, unsatiable sense of thirst for something. And now you have a better understanding, I hope, of suffering, of dukkha. That's exactly dukkha. The state of constant unsatisfactoriness. A big well which has a bottomless end to it. You constantly fill it up with different experiences, whether it's with the eye, with the ear, with the tongue, with the nose, with the body, or with the mind, through mind objects, meaning thoughts. Thoughts of a future, a better future, which is what the parent is sitting there thinking about, when all the child wants is, I want mom just to be comfortable there with me. I just want her to sit there. I just want dad to sit there. Something that was brought to my attention recently was when this person who had worked with kids mentioned this example of animals. And I watched a lot of Discovery growing up, a lot of nature shows with Sir David Attenborough, etc. And I've never seen whether it's a rhinoceros, whether it's a giraffe, whether it's a pack of wolves, whether it's a lion. The babies, the cubs, are always around them, frolicking, playing around, eating. That is something that we more and more are seeing less of in human beings, in the human counterpart of the animals, meaning the children, our children. Why? And then I thought, these children, unlike the baby lion cubs or giraffes, etc., they don't have the sense of safety. The lion, the mom, lioness, or the dad, when they're around, nobody's going to be touching a tiny little fur on their head of the children. Why? Because they are protecting them. They know how to be with the children. They're present. We are not able to do that anymore. We're bringing all our worries together. Our entire being, our existence is constantly burning. Today, if you're driving away on the freeway, just momentarily feel the energy around you. Everybody's trying to rush, beat the other person onto the lane, get to their destination, even though you're going two different places. Everybody's rushing. Everybody's on fire. We're all on fire. And we think that tomorrow is going to heal us. We think that somehow tomorrow, by some miraculous means, things will change. My boss is going to get fired. That colleague that I work with, he or she's going to get fired, and I'm going to, who's getting on my nerve, I'm going to be so much better. That neighbor that never does what he's supposed to is going to be gone. Somebody's going to come and buy their house, or I'm going to be gone. Yay! All fire. Because you're not feeling safe here in this moment, in the comfort of it, despite what you think it is. Now, craving happens because there's this, craving desire, right? We want to change something because it does not fit our own worldview of what needs to happen now. Okay, I worked hard today, so I better be able to sleep tonight. Meanwhile, I'm thinking about the zillion and one things that I have to do tomorrow and that important interview I have to do at 9 a.m. The mind has been gearing up. It's like an engine that's going. All day it's been going like this. And all of a sudden we want it to stop. So the Buddha didn't just show us the problem. He didn't just diagnose. He was the greatest diagnostician, if you might ask me. And if you look at the history and the history of the Dhamma. However, he also gave us, he prescribed us the right quote-unquote medication, the tools, the practice. That's where the practice comes in. So, the simplest practice could be none other than where your nose is. Your air, the air that's coming in and out of your body. The breath. Just watching the breath as it comes in. For one single cycle. Just one. And then if you can't do completely one, try to see if you can do two. And then try to see if you can do three. There were a group of monks one day, and they were discussing this, and whether awakening, nibbana, could occur. And whether there's enough with the breath, and whether there is a number of breaths that you can actually, is a limited amount of number of breath that you can actually hold awareness with, and you become enlightened. So everybody said something. So somebody said months. It will take you 1 month. Another person said, no. I think for me it's if I can just have 1 week of awareness of my breath, I will become awakened. Another person said, no. It's 1 day. You guys are too generous with yourselves. Just 1 day of 24 hours of monitoring, just observing my breath is enough to have brought me awakening. And these were advanced bhikkhus, practitioners. And then another person said, no, it's 1 hour. Just 1 hour. Watching the breath. And then there was one novice monk. I think he was a novice, and he said, just one breath. Just one. In fact, it doesn't even have to be a full cycle. Inhale and exhale. It doesn't even have to be. Just one of those, half of that. And it's interesting because in the suttas, when you read these stories, to kind of validate them, what they love to do, I mean, imagine the privilege and the good karma these individuals had at the time of the Buddha to go and validate it with the Buddha at the end of the day. He's your teacher. Okay, this is one of the things that I was thinking of all day. Master, what do you think? At the most, he's just going to say, no, you're just wrong. And guess what? The Buddha looked at all of their conclusions and he said, that is correct. It doesn't take more than a half a breath. Today, people are scratching their heads, including practitioners of meditation, who have such a hard time wrapping their minds around the possibility that a person can become enlightened, let alone from half a breath. If it's impossible, the Buddha would never have dedicated 45 years of his life teaching it. He would not have even taught us the Four Noble Truths. He was a very pragmatic, engaged teacher. He was very practical. We forget that. So if you have a farmer, if you have a housewife, if you have a courtesan, a prostitute, becoming enlightened, any of the stages, you pause. These people did not know 1/5 of what you know as far as intellect goes, as far as math goes, as far as science goes. But they were there. They experienced the truth of the Dhamma in their lives. We forget that. We kind of brush it off and say, oh, that's just historical mumbo-jumbo. It's not. So how can we bring the Dhamma into practice and not treat the Dhamma as if it's an insurance policy? The Dhamma is just an insurance policy for many of us. You know, I know people who from now have bought, they have taken care of all their funeral arrangements. And they're in their 40s. There's no illness. They just, you know what, I don't want to be a burden for my children. And I understand that. I'm sure their children appreciate that. My dad had that. He's like, yeah, don't worry, I'm taken care of. I've been paying monthly and it's good. You will not be burdened with even a single dime. Okay, Dad, you know, but that's an insurance. So yes, coming here once a week, sitting and meditating, doing the 5 precepts even, if you have gone that far, and doing it and looking at it as a form of rites and ritual. Or if somebody comes to you and asks you, what are the teachings, and you think, okay, how can I put it in a nutshell? Okay, 4 Noble Truths. What does that mean in your life? Have you seen it? Have you experienced it? Do you have the ability to let go of that fire? Just observing is all you need. See, when you're practicing the awareness of the breath, for example, if that's your object, and it's not, for example, metta, or some other object. So basically, you're able to bring your awareness. You will see that you are caught, you are holding on to this fire of an incident that happened to you half an hour ago or yesterday, and you're still holding on to it. I can't believe that person trolled me online, was being brutal to me, even though he doesn't even know me. I just said something, and there he goes. He's just a barrage of insults. Wow, that hurts. And you have the whole day, next month, you're still thinking about that. That is holding on to the fire. On the other hand, that parent who's sitting there with the child, worried about, okay, where am I going to get rent? I'm not sure if I'm like, is there going to be traffic today going home? Because I have to get there. Like, you're not there yet. You're not there yet. So that's in the future. What is happening now? Oh, the breath is happening. That's the closest friend you have. So when you're doing this very practical exercise with yourself, which doesn't require anything, it's easier than going to the bathroom. To go to the bathroom, it's a very passive part of your mechanism, right? But you first need to find the place. You got to go and wait at the Starbucks in the line to see if even if you've parked, finally found a place to park, to get in there. You're waiting in line until, see how hard that can be. But we're not even talking about it. We're talking about bringing the awareness into that one or even half of a breath. And not stay there. See if you can extend it just a little bit. Now, one of the key things when you're doing that, when you're becoming aware of the breath, you're actually allowing the body to kind of uncoil itself. The brain relaxes when you're doing that. The Buddha used the word pasambhaya. When you look at the Anapanasati Sutta or the Satipatthana, he's talking about relaxing the body, tranquilizing, gladdening the mind, gladdening the body. Our word relaxation or release of that tension is pasambhaya. And it brings immediate tranquility behind it. That's why the face relaxes after you've breathed for one or even half a breath and said, okay, I know this happened, I know it's painful, I didn't like this, I know that, but it's crazy for me to be holding on to that fire. And I know I'm worried about the traffic. That's true. You're not minimizing it, but you're putting it where it belongs. Bring your attention back here. And stay with your loved one. If you're eating, that loved one could be a plate of food. So every time you're getting your fork in the food or whatever, or drinking that soup, see if you're fully relaxed in that moment and you're really tasting the soup. And don't become the spoon. The spoon will never taste the soup. Ever. You will. But only if you have relaxed yourself into that moment. Just like you're relaxing and creating that sense of safety for yourself. So it's not the child only that is very much feeling unsafe. Thank you. Where did the time go? It's us, because we're engaged in the other and not here. So without taking more time than I've already have taken, do we have a time for one question?
Of course.
Yes. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Chandana, for the lecture.
Yes.
Always interesting hear your knowledge. Meanwhile, you're talking about what Buddha was saying to all their students or followers. It came to my mind to what I've been getting knowledge. I used to know for a long time ago, but I know now the science talking about that we as a human, we are only 10% of what we are, based on all the billion and billion of microorganisms, microbiome that exists in our body. So, based on what you're talking about, Buddhism, Buddha mentioned about that sometimes we are thinking about something, but actually are the rest of our body through those microscopic microorganisms that live inside of us who are really thinking instead of us?
Well, I've taught biology for many years, so I kind of have an idea what you're talking about. But even those microbiomes, they are huge ecosystems, biosystems, or whatnot. And if you go inside of each of those, you will find smaller microsystems. It's a system. It's like a digestive system, so it has several organs working. Okay, let's pick one of those organs inside of each of those cells. Each of those is made up of countless other cells, or other, in that case, other tiny little particles doing the same thing. So the more you go in, the more diversity you're going to find. So the Buddha's answer to that was very simple. Non-self. Or in that case, it's non-substantiality. What that means, or anatta. It's one of the three declarations. Okay? Anicca, dukkha, anatta. Anatta means there is no Isaac. It's my thought, my perception of what I think Isaac, because it's for conventional sake, so we can communicate. But since the moment you've asked that question, since the last nod, you've been changing. Even science today says every 7 years, your whole body completely, to the bone, has completely changed. There's new cells there. You're over 100 billion, actually 100 trillion cells. So people have been looking and probing and trying to find this thing called self. Sorry, you won't. It's a vast question because I wish I had more time, but you need to, when you look at the breakdown of this thing called a human being, or any being, you see that it is sustained with food. And the Buddha has 4 different categorizations of food that bring about a new being. One is material, food that you eat. The other one is the contact, which I was talking about. You're always seeking the next movie coming out, the next food, the next thing that appears. Then you have the intention, the intentional focus, which takes you from this moment to the next moment. So that is another form of giving yourself food. And then you have the 4th one, which is consciousness, vijnana, which brings about a new body, a new cell. So there is no such a thing as a 10% even. I will disagree with that because there isn't even that. It's changing constantly. We'll talk about that after because I don't want to take more of time. But I hope that kind of hits upon your question.
Thank you, Chandana.
Yeah.